Welcome, Don Jeffries, to the David Knight Show.
Hey, Tony, it's always great to be with you.
Well, it's good to see you, Don. And I don't know if you heard any of the first hour. I was kind of doing my usual thing, going off on inflation and fake money and all that. I led into, I don't know if you saw that there was an article up on summit.news I was just talking about with the Biden's press secretary saying he'd done more for the border than anyone else, any other president. And I mean, he's done more, not to secure the border. He's done more to the border or opening it up than anybody else.
Yeah.
So that's been kind of setting the tone. And I want to talk about, let's bring Gard Goldsmith in here. There he is.
Gard.
Well, hey guys.
Back. How you doing, Gard?
I'm doing very well. Gard. Thanks for the invitation. It's great to be here on the program. This is fantastic.
Good to see you, my friend. I was just talking to Don. I said, I did my usual show for the first hour. Now I'm bringing in the big guns, and we were just, nothing new to see here. More lies from Washington, more devaluation of our dollar, all the rest of it, all the favorite games that the elites play.
Same old Satanism, huh?
Pretty much same old. The works of the lizard people, right?
Hey, by the way, kudos for reading that Jeffrey Tucker piece. Jeffrey is fantastic. And of course, he used to be over at the American Institute for Economic Research over in Great Barrington. And he was one of the guys who was behind the Great Barrington Declaration. And of course, now he's started up the Brownstone Institute. I have a couple friends who work over there, and they're really dedicated to what they do. So awesome stuff.
Well, thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, that was a great piece. I saw it this morning when I was putting the show together, and I thought, it was some good information, very succinct. And, when people start on it, he even mentioned in the article, because it's done so slowly, people don't really truly grasp what's happened. It's like, well, things cost more and I can buy less. And I don't really understand that because you're thinking of the dollar as money and that it's a static value. You don't know where everything else went. Well, it's just that your loss of purchasing power. It's about inflation. That's criminality, criminality 101 when it comes to currency. I definitely want to talk about what you have going on, Gard, but I saw that Don had a new article out. If you go to donaldjeffries.media, let me pull up this screen here. I want to show Don's. He's got a great Substack, folks. Let me stop this screen, start another one. You did this for a whole week or so, didn't you, Gard? You're on your laptop being your own producer. I've done this too. I'm not in my studio in Branson. I told people this morning, don't be alarmed. I didn't get rid of my books. I still have books, I'm in my mom's office at the Main Street Mall in Denison, Texas. But I wanted to bring up Don's article. And just a great title, by the way, Don. And this is, you go to donaldjeffries.media, or you can go directly to his Substack. I Protest by Donald Jeffries. Nothing to fear but fear porn itself. Jump frights, propaganda, and continuous stress. I wanted you to just speak a little bit about this. This is a great piece. Kind of what inspired it, Don, and what the nuts and bolts here. I want to get people to go check out your Substack too.
Well, thanks. Yeah, it's the only place I'm not being shadow banned, so I try to stress it a lot. It's the only place I'm growing. I'm getting a pretty decent amount of paid subscribers now too. Everything's free there, but if you want to pay, that's cool. I obviously appreciate it very much. But I think what probably brought it on was the indications. And again, they back off on these things so much. And I mentioned in there how often we've talked about are we at World War III? Is it going to happen? It's going to be nuclear war. I mean, we're always on the precipice of some doom. And that's why you have a whole subset of people in our world that I call doomsters that really walk around like with doom boners, really, that want, they want an asteroid to hit. I see it, I read it. I mean, maybe it's just big talk, but they want, a World War III because they think this life is so bad that, if you destroyed it, it'd be preferable, I guess. Which I guess maybe I can't blame them for thinking that, but there's always a group of people that are constantly predicting doom in our world. And then, of course, with the mainstream media, they're feeding you a nonstop diet of fear, whether it's foreign boogeymen or what that they've done forever. going back to the dreaded Hun, in World War I. I mean, they're constantly, we have these horrible people that are around the world. We have to do something about it. And when it's not that, it's some dreaded plague, some dreaded disease, some of them very real. Like I talked about diphtheria and things like that. People had to deal with, in the past, had to deal with real fear. They had big families. And one of the reasons they wanted to have big families, because, half the kids would die in infancy or they had so many child diseases then. So there were lots to fear. How many women died in childbirth back then? So, but now when we've eradicated some of that, we still have, the cancer fear that's everywhere, and now we had the terrorist boogeyman, as I pointed out. When's the last time you read anything about terrorism? Apparently they've just decided to retire. I mean, they're literally retiring from the scene. They were whatever they call them now, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, ISIL, Taliban. I mean, they made up so many names for them. They changed the spelling of Gaddafi's name, for heaven's sakes. Go try to find the original spelling, which was Q. Now it's always G. It's like, when did they change this guy's name? I mean, that's the kind of stuff that bothers me, makes me think it's all theatrical, because nobody but me apparently remembers that. I remember Gaddafi when he spelled his name with a Q. But
he was the original QAnon.
Exactly. He was the original QAnon. So, so here we have, when they started talking about this thing about, with round 2, Friday the 13th part 2 or whatever it is, with, Jason's really coming back this time. And it's going to be, with this new variant, and I don't know if they're going to do it, but there are lots of indications. We have to lock down again. We have to put masks on. Will Joe Biden put a quarantine on all the unvaccinated? I hear all these things. And hopefully, if the past is any indication, it won't be that bad. But it's constant. That's in the air all the time. So people are fearing, what are they going to do? Are they going to send us to the FEMA camps? That kind of stuff, which is does worry me a bit still. But so I said, well, let me just write this. How much fear is a part of our lives? I mean, you've had, I don't know how many millions of Americans, have to go to psychiatrists and get prescriptions just to deal with things because of the stress, and they know how bad those antidepressants are, but for some of them, it's a good trade-off. You don't have sex anymore. You can't do whatever, but but at least you can cope with things. You can sleep. And that's just a real indictment of our world that, that we're that stressed out. And, but it's largely in part, some of it, of course, is, family dysfunction, all that, but large part because of this nonstop fear porn. And the fact that they would even try this COVID thing again is just, it's mind-boggling. And, I've read lots of people saying, well, this time we'll be ready. And Trump came out famously and said, we're not going to take, I forget what the thing was, but he was talking very boldly, we're not going to stand up for, as if he's going to be in a position to do anything. But he certainly was there issuing the order the first time. So I don't know. I just thought it was when I'm writing, I write 2 or 3 times a week on there, and the ideas come in my head and I just go with it. But I just think that fear is a huge part of our lives. And it's obviously the COVID thing showed they locked down the entire world. So they came up with something that's way bigger than anything, way better than anything they've ever tried before it worked. And this is the, the essence of fear porn. When you get people worried about their health and worried that they might die from this invisible virus, much more effective than, demonizing Saddam Hussein or whatever. So hopefully I got good feedback from it, but it's nonstop fear porn. Of course, I have a play on words of FDR's ridiculous. There's nothing to fear but fear itself,
I was thinking about that too. I mean, I obviously play on words there, but what a huge departure from the inauguration of FDR. That was March 4th, 1933. And he borrowed a line. Not many people know this, but he borrowed that line from Napoleon Hill, who wrote Think and Grow Rich. That was a little side borrow there. But that was a different, again, he was trying to get people to calm down, because that's why the next day, I think he declared the banking holiday. It wasn't the next day or the next week. Yeah. It was really quick, right? And of course, after that, he made gold illegal because people were hoarding gold, and because they knew that there was an issue with the currency because of the Federal Reserve. But what a massive disparity between those two times. And and the government was corrupt then. But they wanted to quell fear so they could control the economy. because they felt like the economy would go off the rails. I mean, Don's written Survival of the Richest. You've talked about this. It was in their best interest. Now it's in their best interest, Don, to keep you fearful, to not have you think rationally. So this is a massive shift, massive change. And I'm glad you brought that up, because it is all around us. When we are victims of this to ourselves in alternative media, it's like there's so many things hitting us all at once. We have to think rationally. Obviously, I start from the premise that, like George Carlin said, whatever the government tells me, I don't believe it. Right? I start there. I don't believe anything they tell me, because I used to work for them, so I understand a little bit of how it's all made. Right? But again, you see this spirit of fear. It's being pushed, and you have to ask yourself why. You see that there's all these events happening all at the same time, and we get into this mode where we know that there's a nefarious reason behind most events, but it's hard to dissect that anymore. I mean, Don, you wrote Hidden History too, and I've read all your books, Don. But you've been covering this for a long time. Do you feel like that? And I want to get Gard to answer this too. Do you feel like we are in a period where more things, the acceleration, the amount of these events rolling out is certainly quicker than any other pace in my lifetime? What are your thoughts, Don? It has to be on purpose if there's this many events happening at once?
Yeah, absolutely. It is. We talked for years about the boiling and the frog analogy, which is basically gradualism. And that's how the people that run this world operated for forever. The idea was to, gradually turn the heat up, and the frog doesn't know it's being boiled, and eventually it's cooked. And that's what we were doing. That's what Americans are doing. They didn't see, some of us tried to point out to them. You see what this 5 years ago, look at it now. But with COVID, we went into warp speed, not just the vaccine. And we went away from gradualism to warp speed. So now everything is coming all at once. I didn't even address that in the article, but I could have brought up the fear of AI, the fear of robotics. I mean, how many movies have we seen where the robots take over? Some of us think that's a real possibility. I don't. Who knows? I mean, if they're putting certain kinds of intelligence in that. I've heard the recordings of. I don't know if you've seen the. And again, this gets into the fear porn. That new thing out where the guy posted the thing about Alexa saying there's who's going to be in the election, and there's not going to be an election, and she spouts out something in 2024. And again, there's a whole subset of people, and I've heard that going back to when Clinton was in office, at least, where the right was saying, oh, they're not going to be an election, they're going to spend section, Bill Clinton's going to be president for life, that kind of stuff. So that's always there. And I mean, they could do that. Who knows? At this point, nothing they do would surprise me. And if they did suspend the election and just continue with Biden as president, do you think those, 100 million or how many people really have Trump derangement syndrome? Do you think they would complain? I don't think they would complain at all, and they would rationalize. Well, we're in the middle of a pandemic too, and we're World War III is there. Putin's in Ukraine. How can we have an election? I can see them, saying rationalize, and that's the problem. Is you have everything we talk about now. Half of the country has lost its mind because of Trumpenstein. So they're willing to accept anything if they think it'll keep him out of office, because that's their overriding interest. So I don't know what they're going to do if he actually, dies and he's not there anymore, because they would have to transfer that to somebody else. But all of the demonization has been gone into one person. So this is moving so fast. It's incredible. And that's why it's hard to keep up with it. But and certainly it makes the fear porn warp speed as well.
Right. Yeah, it certainly does. Gard, Goldsmith, your thoughts? I mean, I threw a lot out there, but I figured you'd be able to pick it up, my friend. What are your thoughts?
Well, it's a great piece by Don, and I love the reflection back to the old days of the nuclear fallout shelter and stuff like that. It's so evocative, and Don's such a good writer that you can just picture yourself there with him as a kid, stacking the cans in preparation for this terrible thing. And to use the touchstone of the quote, "We have nothing else to fear but fear itself." It depends on whether they want you to fear something or they want you to overlook something that is a real crisis that they helped create. So that line from Roosevelt facilitated his attempt to try to pull a Leslie Nielsen to say, nothing to see here, everybody, everything's fine.
Yeah.
You know, it's sort of the the Joe Biden FEMA Maui situation where it's like, oh no, we're working very hard. Pay no attention to those guys in the $1,000 a night hotels 45 minutes away from the site, and pay no attention to the everything that led up to that fire, which was absolute government malfeasance and claiming over rights and things like that. And I think one of the key things to recognize is there are two things that they tend to do, especially with the Hegelian dialectic and Marxism, cultural Marxism. Collectivists have to work very hard, and this is one of the great things in Live Not by Lies, the book. They point out that collectivists, political collectivists who want power, have a very, very strong ability to be able to, or they try to take advantage of the fact that they will split people apart so that we as individuals will be seeing each other as the enemy. And the one thing that can bring everybody together, the one thing that can make everything fair and just, social justice or equitable, is the central authority. We can't do it ourselves. We have been totally atomized, and they will bring us together. And oftentimes what they'll do is that the thing that will bring us together is the crisis. So it's this constant Hegelian dialectic with the forever ratcheting effect that Robert Higgs, a great economic historian, talked about in his Crisis and Leviathan. They will announce the crisis, they'll ratchet in a new thing, and then that thing never leaves. So that's what they were testing out with COVID-19, but they had already established so many of the pieces of the gears on that once they set it in motion, they were just testing out the machine they had already built.
Don, you wrote Masking the Truth. I interviewed you on my show. I know you've been on here with David, and kind of very fortuitous. I mean, you did the hidden history of COVID 1984 and the lockdowns and the power grab and all the criminality. It's right there in Don's book, very well researched. And, you have this latest round of, and there is, I think, some substantiation, but, they need to roll out something again. You need to have another lockdown election, right? It makes things very politically expedient for them to have total control of the population. We haven't seen anything really confirmed, but we, those of us in alternative media are very concerned about a possible lockdown 2.0. And I know you've written about that. I want to get both of your thoughts on this. I mean, have we seen anything concrete? And if so, where is that headed? And do we have any timelines? And are they going to roll this out in the next, is it short term, near term, long term? What are we looking at, Don?
Well, I think it's really hard to tell because so much of this, again, is theater, and Trump is at the heart of it. The idea, because the other side, our side, the 70, or I don't know how many million, let's say at least 50 million people probably of the 70 or 80 million that voted for Trump probably remain loyal to him, largely loyal to him. I would think. He's lost some support, but I would think there's probably still 50 million diehard Trump loyalists, at least to some degree out there. So they are they're believing that Trump can save us. This time he's going to do it. So they would believe that they're going to do this to stop Trump. They're either not going to hold an election, or they're going to come up with some kind of new law, which the Democrats will be able to pass, that you can't be a convicted felon or whatever. You can't serve as president from prison, because I don't make predictions, but I think that's a pretty very colorful scene to envision. Is Donald Trump being elected president from prison and actually serving in the office? Maybe they'll move the desk there or something. I don't know. And again, with his people around him, his crew, he'll probably have a crew in the prison, and maybe who knows. But my new Secretary of Defense, you don't know. But I can see them doing that just to make this a complete laughing stock, as if you have a president now who is walking around shaking hands with the air. Clearly doesn't know where he is. If the only way maybe to go beyond that is to have an actual prisoner as president. So maybe they'll do that. I don't know. But so when they say these things, again, they make so many dire pronouncements or hints that they're going to do something, and most of the time it never happens. And but the timeline, the way it works is that we're steadily going down. We're losing rights. Nothing good ever happens. But most of the dire predictions don't come true that people think. So I think we'll have an election. The votes will be, they'll be counted as like they're always counted. They'll determine who they want in there as a figurehead. But I don't think you're going to see these really dire things. But I don't know. And if they lock everything down again, which they could easily do, I didn't think they'd do it before. Again, you're going to have half the country at least. I mean, some of the people may not fall for it this time. Maybe they've been woken up to again and say, well, I don't want to put these masks on again. I don't want to do this thing again. I think you will have fewer people, but I still think you'll have a majority that'll support it. And that's the problem we have with all of this. Everything we talk about, whether it doesn't matter what the issue is, the fact that we are outnumbered. And it's one thing to deal with the elite. And I don't know what they would do if we came together as a force. If 75, 80% of the people were united and understood what was going on like we do, or we think we do. And if that was the case, could they get away with this? I don't know. They have a lot of power. Maybe they just have to come out of the shadows and stop pretending this is a democracy or whatever they claim it is. But that's the problem. That's why I wanted to mention, I don't know if you talked about it in the first hour or not, but I mean, you see what happened to Joe Biggs, who was given 17 years. I mean, this outrage. I was watching one of those investigation discovery shows that I do for research in case I ever write the book about the injustice system. And I keep notes on all the outrageous, examples of it. And usually it's people getting sent away for life on, absolutely no evidence at all, no credible evidence, talking about reasonable doubt. But apparently no jury understands the concept of that. But sometimes they let obviously guilty people off or very lenient. And last night there was a case I watched of a 38-year-old school security guy who kidnapped a 14-year-old girl and kept her in his home for 10 years as a sexual slave and recorded all the sexual acts they did. They all documented. His sentence he served 15 years in prison. 2 years less than Joe Biggs might serve for going to the Capitol to protest. That's what I'm talking. And most of the country isn't outraged by that. They don't care. Most of I saw the comments. Oh, good for him. He shouldn't have gone there. They're happy about it. And Joe Biggs, I mentioned him because he's known to David, and I think he used to. Back when Alex Jones was a much better show, it was a pretty good show. They used to have remote things, and a lot of times David would be teamed up with Joe. And they would go on, and I used to love those location things where they would go out and they'd show what was really happening. I remember one time they went to visit there was a building in, I think, Chicago, where they were holding mostly Black people that they were just kind of throwing in this building with no charges, nothing, and just holding them in there. And I thought, this is completely outside the law. And that's the kind of good work they did. And so I don't buy for a second that he's any kind of dangerous person, but he exemplifies what's wrong with this thing when more than half the country doesn't care. More than half the country doesn't care about him getting a sentence like that. They don't care that we don't even know how many people are in prison, have been held as political prisoners now for over 2 years, denied all due process. This is Abraham Lincoln, redo. This is the exact same thing he did, and I guess maybe a majority of people didn't care back then, but it's shameful. And so the only hope we have is our power in numbers. So to stop a lockdown, unjust, really, if we had a hale and hearty people, those prison authorities and everybody, all our officials would have been tarred and feathered a long time ago. I mean, you would have a crowd, an angry mob that you see in some of those old films that would have stormed DC prison and would have freed those prisoners because they shouldn't be there. They've been denied all due process and nobody seems to care. And now when they're finally going to trial, they're getting these outrageous sentences and nobody cares about that. And so I just wanted to mention it because I think it, again, exemplifies where we're at, is that the only way we can possibly win or, try to make this country sane again is to have a majority of the people not go in and not support this. But right now they're supporting it. So don't think for a second, if they decide to have that lockdown again, the majority is going to support it. I mean, I've talked to them. When you talk to people that have had 8 booster shots and have gotten COVID 4 times, they don't care. Nothing matters to them. All they have to do is say, well, it's good. It's a good thing it's still I think I heard that, the press secretary of Biden saying, this is still the best way to deal with this is to get vaccinated. Okay. So, keep saying that. We heard, what was it? I just saw, 12-year-old, they said a 12-year-old boy, dropped dead in gym class yesterday in California of a heart attack. Okay. And you had people I was looking, I think it was Yahoo or something. The majority of the comments, you don't have any evidence, that he could have had a congenital heart effect. I mean, I had never heard of that happening ever when I was a kid. No 12-year-old was going to drop dead during gym class. Didn't happen. So, but it doesn't matter how many times it happens. Again, that half of the country, they bought the narrative and they're going to believe whatever they say. And they're just going to look at us and say, you guys don't have any evidence. Okay. Yeah. It's a sad situation.
Well, you've written about the injustice systems. That's exactly what this is. I'm glad you brought up the Joe Biggs. No, I didn't cover that in the first hour. It just really goes to show you where you want a barometer of where we are. I mean, the so-called top legal mind, Alan Dershowitz, a couple of years ago said that the government has the right to forcibly put you into a room and stick a needle in your arm of an experimental genetic code injection. And he would argue it at the Supreme Court and win. I thought, you just nullified your entire career and anything you've ever talked about with the Bill of Rights or the Constitution or the rule of law or common law. You just nullified all of that because you're obviously a stooge for the power structure. It's so obvious. And, you talk about these egregious, outrageous sentences, and that's what this is. None of the people who are actually responsible for the PSYOP of J6 or whatever it is, the LARP with real consequences for a lot of good people. And I think that's pretty obvious now. And then some of those same people are raising money again. They're ready to take the grift, the grift that keeps on giving. Gard, your thoughts on that as well?
Yeah, seeing what happened to Joe, and I don't know Joe personally, but as you say, I know people who know Joe, and I've seen so many of the good things that Joe has done, and it inspires one to reflect on all those other characters who already have been imprisoned in terrible conditions for 2 3/4 years. What's this fallacy of a speedy trial determined by whom? Oh, the people who are imprisoning you. Oh, okay. That really is a power imbalance right there. So the whole thing is just absolutely ridiculous. Then you look at the immediate corrupt minds, the darkness in these people's hearts, like Nancy Pelosi and others. And then the lack of integrity on the part of people like Donald Trump to see that these people are being treated this way and not even really speak out, let alone hand them a dime to try to help their legal defenses, and like Don said, I've seen Joe Biggs in particular, just such great examples of a guy who believes in the human spirit in everyone, regardless of their national origin, their religion, their color, whatever. It's just terrible. And I also saw some of those comments, Don, and, I was doing my streaming show last night and I didn't mention, and I feel I should have mentioned some of the absolutely vile, terrible things people were saying. And it just shows you the vitriol and hatred that they've been able to inspire among people who are just willingly ignorant of anything, and it's all my guy versus your guy. And John Stossel released a video just before I went streaming last night at 6. He put a video out that mentioned that both Trump and Biden are criminals. They have engaged in so much criminal activity that it's ridiculous. And to try to support either of them is to tarnish your own soul, your own reputation, your own integrity. So get out of it, break out of it. Don't look at these people as your saviors. And again, it's in a way, it's a manifestation of the same sort of thing. You break everybody up and then you have them unite behind some great cause. In this case, the cause is their figurehead, their totem, You know, it's just a new head on top of the totem. It's like Gilligan on top of that totem in Gilligan's Island. You know, he's got the face of the god, and he's just up there, and everybody's gonna, oh, you know, and then he falls down. They realize that he's just a person. You know, I didn't know it was that allegorical, but I guess Gilligan works on many levels, right?
We're definitely in the politics of mugshots. I talked a little bit about that in the beginning of the show, and you know, clearly, you know, folks have been, you know, pulled into this left-right paradigm, and this makes it even more pronounced. I don't think, now flip the script. I don't think that the Republicans are going to be going after, especially if there's a Republican president. I don't see how that's possible. I think Don's probably correct on this. That we've seen the last Republican president in our lifetime. You know, it's a selection, so you never really can tell. You know, if you're looking at demographics and politics and polling, then that's probably true, but you never know. But I don't think you're going to see the same. I don't think you see it in reverse. I could be wrong. You know, I don't. The House, they're, you know, toying with the idea of impeachment and investigations. That's usually the right, or so-called the Republicans, are usually really good at just using an issue and raising money, right? Whereas the Democrats will go for the jugular. They'll send their DAs after you, and the prosecutors, and the Justice Department, and especially when you're talking about having an entire state within a state controlled with continuity of these types of people that have been put in place. They're dependent on the system, so the system can't self-correct. And I see this just looking at the headlines of Drudge. I'd love to get both of your takes on where we go from here with these sort of using lawfare, persecution, and then the flip side of that, which is the profiting off of it. I mean, you got the mug shot on mugs, selling them. What do you think, Don?
Yeah, I mean, that's. I cannot think that Trump is anything but an actor. But if he isn't an actor, I guess that would be part of this incredible personality, the likes of which few of us have ever met. This childish ego, this juvenile sense of humor, his name calling, and this cartoonish desire to make everything about himself. I mean, the biggest narcissist you've ever seen. And so the entire thing is, and again, nobody questions. Like, I remember his buddy, Lindsey Graham, his golf buddy, who doesn't agree with a single point he's ever raised, and is good rhetoric, you know, his campaign rhetoric in 2016. Lindsey Graham opposes all of that. Mr. Open Borders, Mr. wanted to shoot the January 6th protesters, things like that. But that's his golf buddy. And as soon as he was prosecuted the first time, Lindsey Graham was on Fox News or something, immediately calling for people to send money to Donald Trump. And nobody questions this. Why does Donald Trump need money? Even if his wealth is exaggerated, and a lot of people think it's exaggerated. So even if he's not a billionaire and he's only worth $800 billion, why would somebody that's worth $800 million struggle to find lawyers? But he certainly looks like he struggles for money, because the attorneys he hires are the worst in the world. They had a thing last week. I didn't look at it much, but apparently one of his clownish attorneys jumped up and did something to get the judge all fired up or whatever. And then he has that attractive young lady, who I'm sure he hired for her looks, that was associated with a New Jersey garage or something. And how do you go from that to being an attorney for the president of the United States? That's the best he can do. Even if he didn't raise a penny, but he's raising all this money, he certainly isn't giving any of it to the J6 people. And we've talked about that. You know, I've talked about that many times. Why doesn't he? And he doesn't even, worse than that, he doesn't talk about them. He doesn't mention them. And what the little attention he would pay to them would be to center it around himself. You know, I actually won. You know, they know I won. I won in a landslide. It's all about him, how they robbed him. But they robbed these people of their freedom, and they made them political prisoners. He's not going to pay it. We know that people at his level don't actually go to prison unless it's part of the Trumpenstein show, which it might be. As I said, if they decide, hey, you know, we're just going to take America 2.0 into the stratosphere. We're going to go, you know, full banana republic here, and we're going to have our president, you know, be from, you know, talking from prison. So, and then it'll still be excuse because then they'll have 4 more. Well, what do you expect? Trump couldn't get anything done. They had him in prison. How could he do anything? It's like last time they were going after him. Now, well, what did you expect the guy to do? I get that all the time. What do you expect him? He was under attack the entire time. Okay, yeah, that's true. So, who knows what they're going to do? But this is this grifting thing, and you're seeing it like this guy Vivek Ramaswamy, who I like a lot of what he says. But I don't know if you saw a video came up this week that, and this is what makes people go down the rabbit hole. There's a video of the Al Sharpton show on MSNBC back in the 90s, and a young Vivek Ramaswamy just happened to be one of the people they called on in the audience, and they happened to call on another notable figure as well, the same show, young Pete Buttigieg. Now, what are the odds of that? That's like going back to 9/11 when one of the first witnesses they went out on the street to talk to was, and I always forget her name, Rachel something, just happened to find this attractive girl on the street. Oh, let's talk to her. What do you think? She later would become one of Tiger Woods' most high-profile mistresses. And that's the kind of things, and you see these because it's the odds are against that kind of thing ever happening, but it happens all the time in these things. So, I think again, you look at that kind of stuff and you see that this is why so many of us go down the rabbit hole, and we can't be blamed for doing it. And so I don't begin to understand what they're doing, especially when you introduce Trump into the equation and he's at the center of all this, then all bets are off because nothing is as it seems. I mean, you're in Wizard of Oz territory every time he steps in the room because it's just there's nothing that works the way it should when Trump is there.
It's like, is the simulation breaking down? Central casting you run out of ideas. We need to get Gard Goldsmith working for the globalists to give him some more interesting.
Yeah.
The guy who's running the WorldCoin, who came up with the AI systems, his name Sam Altman. I brought this up and made David laugh. His name is Altman, and then the guy who crashed the crypto system is Bankman, and he's fried. So I thought that, and they're both the tale of two Sams. They're both Sam Altman and Sam Bankman. So, Gard, any thoughts on what Don has to say? And I know that you got an update. I was texting with you before the show on that issue that David had texted me on yesterday.
Yeah, sure thing. I'm just thinking, I do not like green eggs and ham. I do not like Sam I am. Who would have known that the doctor of Seuss could have been so handy? I get to mention Gilligan and Dr. Seuss in the same half hour. It must be, but it is amazing because it just shows you how ridiculous some of the stuff is, especially when people throw, there's so much at stake. And coming at it right now, analyzing it sort of after the fact, as we see what's been going on with Joe, we see what happened with the J6 people, we see the nefarious activity of people like, especially the Democrats, pushing. Obviously, it serves many purposes. It serves to allow them to continue to demonize anybody who wants decentralization, call them white nationalists, call them white supremacists, the same way they want to demonize parents who go to school board meetings because they don't want LGBTQ stuff in their schools or whatever, and, that sort of stuff. But, it probably serves a purpose to mention also that as we look at this, it doesn't mean that we don't acknowledge that there were fishy, weird things that happened in the vote, in the election itself. And to say, you could say that almost any decade, the past 35 years, or even longer than that in American history, that in some sort of vote, especially national votes, there was something weird that happened, right? I mean, go back to the Kennedy election, right? So, all of these types of things, it doesn't mean that you can't, hold both thoughts and say, there probably was something bad about the election. It's probably not going to be provable because it's, they set it up very easily with the mail-in ballots, which was Trump's fault. He declared the emergency and then everything followed. The dominoes started to fall. It's like, no, don't put the dominoes down and you're set. Get away from it. And I do think it's interesting too. You mentioned that this other story that David was following, and hats off to David to be following that story. Because it sort of folds into the idea of, well, if you are at all a traditionalist, if you at all want decentralization, then you'll be demonized. And so the LGBTQ thing comes up, as you mentioned, this is this story that I was following. And the story has to do with something that was going to be happening on Saturday, as in Tennessee. They were going to have this special event, and it was going to be happening at Maryville College. And the Blount County District Attorney General Ryan Desmond, I'm just checking things out here, threatened legal action because they were going to have this pride event, and it looked like there were going to be drag performers there, and it was going to be something where they were going to bring kids. And they have an indecent exposure statute in front of lewd and lascivious behavior statute that this attorney general said, we're going to enforce this. Now, this is a school that gets state funding. It's not a completely private place. And even if it were, if you're engaging in a criminal activity and exposing kids to something that has a statute that prohibits it, then he is sworn to enforce the statute. So we were, David said he was going to be trying to follow this, and Tony, you were trying to follow it, and you contacted me this morning and said, let's make sure we keep up on this thing for the audience and so on. So I did some looking around, and the latest that I've got is from the CBS affiliate in Tennessee, in Knoxville, and the headline says ACLU files lawsuit against Blount County DA after legal threats over pride event. The filing lists Christian artist and drag performer Flamey Grant Christian, that's Matthew Lovegood is his real name, and Blount Pride as the plaintiffs. Because, it's totally conforms to the Bible to do this. So the ACLU is now part of this. They have filed a lawsuit in response to a letter from Blount County District Attorney General Ryan Desmond threatening legal action. So last week you and I were communicating, it looked like it might have been canceled for Saturday at Maryville College, but I'm not sure. And I don't know whether unofficially people will still show up and there'll be police problems, or officially it's still going on. But right now, the latest that was updated on the 31st at 10:40 in the morning from this local TV affiliate has the district attorney sending the letter and the ACLU responding. And it says here in the letter, Desmond said that he plans to enforce the Tennessee Adult Entertainment Act, also known as the anti-drag law. It's a law that went into effect in April, allowing criminal charges for anyone who puts on loosely defined adult-oriented shows in public places or spaces where children might view them. The law has faced backlash and so on and so forth. Thomas L. Parker, a Trump-appointed district judge in Shelby County, ruled that the law was unconstitutional in June due to an appeal filed by Tennessee Attorney General Jonathan Skrmetti. Desmond has claimed that he has the legal authority to enforce the law in Blount County, which is outside of that judicial district where the law was seen to be unconstitutional. So the ACLU is filing a lawsuit, and they're saying that Desmond sent a threatening letter directly to Blount County Pride and Maryville College instead of making a public declaration that he intended to enforce the law. And so Desmond said that he was not trying to violate anyone's First Amendment rights. He said it was a notice, and the purpose of the notice was simply to give individuals reasonable and fair notice that there is a criminal statute that is still in effect in this jurisdiction. So we'll see what happens. But it looks like he has given them warning, and if they engage in this activity, the police will be sanctioned to arrest people. So we'll find out what happens there.
Well, thank you for that update, Gard. I mean, I this morning I was looking at the text that I was having with David yesterday. I thought, well, I'll get Gard to look at this. I'm a paratrooper who likes books and silver dollars, but real journalism, I'll go to Gard Goldsmith. So thanks for that update. It reminds me of the meme that makes me laugh every time. I don't know if you've seen this meme, guys, but there's one where you've had one, like it has like the really caricatured out drag queen story time person, and there's a goose that's following him around, like honking at him, and it says, why don't you do this to the old people? Why aren't you doing this for the homeless? And it just they keeps calling, why is it just the kids? And it keeps getting louder. Why is it just the kids? I think we all know, right? Why
Yeah.
is it just the children? For the sake of the children.
And you know, Tony, the thing that gets me about that is, you know, I mentioned earlier the "Do Not Live by Lies," right? "Live Not by Lies" book, based on the speech by Solzhenitsyn, and it's interesting because this really is one of the most powerful ways for collectivists to gain political power, to build the political power structure, and psychologically to get everybody to say, we need some arbiter. We need somebody. So what they do is they constantly come up with or create new Davids, the new minority, and you know, people's goodwill and their kindness, especially women. You'll find women are the ones who are bringing the kids to these events.
Yes.
They say, well, we need to be understanding, you know, so they prey upon people's goodwill and their compassion to say, we want to be understanding of the outcast. We want to allow for that. So then they also have the other side of the coin, which is, we don't like the person who stands against this. So they split people apart. They create all these divisions. And of course, the only uniter, the place where you have to fight over everything, is in the state. And so that is one of the reasons why I'm an anarchist, to try to recognize all the time that it creates the tragedy of the commons, where anything that government gets involved with doesn't actually answer the question. It actually makes everybody argue over how those resources are going to be used. And the best way to actually recognize what people value is to get the government out of it, not have the government come up with standards over masks and 6-foot distancing. Just have people own private property. And if you don't like what they're doing, don't go there. And if you don't like what somebody might be doing when he comes into your place, don't let him in. But we can't do that now because everybody has seen that private property isn't private property in their eyes now, according to the government, especially since the 1964 Civil Rights Act public accommodations portion. And again, what was that about? That portion was about compassion. We are going to now break down the concept of individual liberty and private property, of people who started their own businesses, and we're going to force people to accept people. And I'll give you one example that I mentioned on my show, and I brought this up to David just in private conversation. Byron Allen, the big media mogul who started on Real People and so on, stand-up comedian. He owns, I think it's Black Entertainment Television. He's one of the biggest entertainment moguls in the history of the world now, right? So get this. What I often tell people is, if the government can make everything equitable and fair by breaking down private property, and they say that anybody who owns a business must allow and do business with anybody who walks in, because it's not really private property, it's public. And of course, public property really is that which has tax money paying for it. But we're going to make it, everything is de jure or de facto public property because you open your doors to the public, which is absurd. So let's say I have a backyard barbecue. Does that mean that the government can then ship people in there, right? You know, it's ridiculous. So, but that's their concept. If that's the case, then we know that trade is a two-way street. It's a voluntary activity. So if I live, and I actually talked to a woman from Africa about this where I was working. I was like, if I live in a place that's 99.9% not racist, and there's one Nazi skinhead who works there, does that mean that he also not only has to cater to me if I walk in and I don't like him, if I'm, you know, some color that he doesn't like, but does it also mean that since he is now the minority, I have to do business with him when I walk by, right? Because I own my own property. I'm not trading with him. Where does this concept end? And this is where Byron Allen comes in. Byron Allen is suing McDonald's because McDonald's isn't advertising enough. In other words, buying enough of his advertising space on Black Entertainment Television. He set a quota to McDonald's and accusing them of racism because they're not walking into his shop to buy his stuff. And this is where it leads. There is no individuality anymore. They can break it down even to the point where, no, you haven't bought enough of this stuff. And they've already done it with health insurance, right? So where does it stop? It stops when people recognize that the government has every incentive to force you to have to do what the government says. And in every instance, they will create a new little guy that they've got to support and you've got to feel compassion for. They'll split everybody up, and the answer is going to be the top-down authority at the top of the pyramid. They'll be the ones making the decisions. It's the way it always happens.
Nothing says I love my audience and I care about you like I want more McDonald's advertising revenue.
Yeah.
Well, if you listen to my friend John Barber, who worked with Byron Allen, he told me he's the biggest idiot he's ever met in his life. So I think against that says something for the magic of the marketplace, that somebody that's stupid. I mean, John Barber literally said he's the dumbest person he's ever met in his life, and he's because what I want to do when we're talking about this, first of all, I wish the ACLU would launch a lawsuit on behalf of the January 6th prisoners. But as they said a few years ago, they're not so much interested in the civil liberties thing anymore, the American Civil Liberties Union. But, they're more concerned with racism and white supremacy. But, how many people remember flashers? Nobody talks about flashers anymore. Right. These are guys who their sexual perversion was to flash themselves, usually in front of little girls. It happened to my sisters when they were young. I don't know where they are now, but why, based on this, why couldn't you have a flashers parade? I mean, what is the difference? Why couldn't they go out and get off with because this is obviously what the gay pride is doing. Otherwise, as you mentioned, you wouldn't exclusively want kids watching it. I mean, people with any kind of a normal sex drive, they don't want little children involved unless they want to do something with those little children sexually. Otherwise, they don't fit into the equation. Why are you here? You don't need to be saying this. I've got an S&M fantasy here, but I don't want little kids around. That kind of ruins it. That's it. But to them, they want it there. Obviously, what is the difference between? Can you imagine any mothers doing that? Let's go down to the flashers parade. And there's no pride. They're not dressing up anything. These are heterosexuals, but they're obviously really perverted. And they want to expose themselves to little girls. You got to bring your little daughters, though. Little boys, they don't really get off on that. Obviously, we know what that would be. They would be arrested. The indecent exposure would be instantly enforced. This is what I've talked about all the time. It's what we need to look at with all the pride stuff and the transgender stuff. It's all based on some kind of homosexual thing, because the idea is to stop births. This is a eugenicist thing. The idea is to stop possible procreation. So if you get little girls to become little boys to become little girls, no birth is possible. If you have, crazy, and Matt Walsh has said, and I agree with him completely, any mother that takes her child, a little kid, it's almost always a little boy, to one of these drag strip shows should be locked away for life. I mean, that is a massive crime. She might as well be sexually abusing her child to do that. That's incredibly abusive, but nobody's looking at that. And if you watch, Gard is exactly right. It's the mothers always. There may be some fathers there going right on, but there's no single father doing this. The mother's always front and center because they're the one buying this propaganda. And this is insidious, but we need to look at it that if this was just a thing where, because people talk about pedophilia and stuff, if this was just a thing where they wanted just to have sex with children, then you would see a National Girl Love Association, like NAMBLA. NAMBLA is an organization that is advocating illegal stuff, and they've been around for decades. And I don't see any church groups assembled outside NAMBLA headquarters, wherever that is. No, this is all about homosexual activity. Otherwise, you would not just have little boys pretending to be girls, and they're celebrated 8, 9, 10 years old, stripping in clubs. Again, you talk about illegal, and men are throwing dollar bills at them. But what would happen if that was an 8, 9-year-old girl going to a strip club where biological females strip, and men were throwing dollar bills at her? Do you think obviously the reaction would be way different? Yeah. And I'm not suggesting that they do that. That would obviously be awful too. But this is all about pushing the gay agenda, about grooming. And that's why you see it's all little boys pretending to be girls are front and center, crazy deranged mothers pushing this, and to the point where indecent exposure laws. I think if you still have sex in public or something in most places, they would arrest you for that. But it's all out the window with the gay pride thing, without the transgender thing. they do what they want. If their stuff falls out and they're shaking it in front of the littlest kids, this is pride, baby. This is gay pride. So, I'm not coming out for flasher pride, but I would like to see if they had a flashers parade or something like that, what the reaction would be. First of all, there wouldn't be any mothers taking their kids to that, but it's the same thing, isn't it? Adult men exposing themselves to little kids. But, we don't look at it that way. But they dress it up in this pride thing, and it's absolutely ridiculous because what are you proud of? What is there to be proud of? Isn't pride a sin? And this is nothing to be proud of. But this is our world now. Pride.
I wouldn't be surprised if all the flashers just were either elected to Congress or went to work for the IRS. One of the two. Maybe TSA. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah.
TSA.
Hey, can I ask you guys a question? I'm sort of curious what you think about this. I look at this as operating on two levels that sort of all are under one overall supernatural agenda. The purpose of a lot of this seems to be to remove individual agency, to remove the ability of the individual to be able to exercise his own morals, build his own ethics with other individuals, whether it be person to person or small groups, small towns, decentralization. This tends to be all of it, and to answer to the artifice, the artificial, the non-human. And I think that is a very satanic agenda. And when you see the breakdown of tradition of men and women and families and growth and things like that, depopulation agendas, a lot of the things that they use also seem to serve this other purpose, which is to dehumanize and de-agency individuals, to ruin individuality. Because if and what's weird is they do it with a sort of recursive supposed support for individuality and I was born this way sort of thing, but it's all about conformity. That's actually what it's about. So they claim that they're promoting individuality when really what they're doing is removing individual agency to decide about right and wrong. And they're using these people that they put forward as the victims, culture of victimhood, which has been going on for ages. It's one of the reasons why I detest Oprah Winfrey's book club. That show is just a cesspool of, I'm celebrating my victimhood and overcoming victimhood, and I'm still a victim, and everybody's a victim. So we're going to recognize victimhood, and we're going to overcome it, but there's going to be constant victimhood. So we have to make sure we fight the people who are victimizing people. It's like, no, you're friggin' victimizing people, okay? Why don't you stop that? And this is the sort of thing where they are really attacking individual sovereignty. And I think there is a very, very dark agenda behind it, breaking down the family, and at the same time also breaking down the human quality of forming your own voluntary bonds with people. And there seems to be many facets of this. And I think a lot of it is removing individual agency and replacing it with the artificial.
I agree with that entirely. I mean, it's to replace the system, to supplant the family, tradition, God, all the things that make a civilization possible. It's just to tear down the very fabric of our existence. And no, I'm with you 100%, Gard. And Don, I know we got about 2.5 minutes or so before Charlie Robinson jumps on. I'd love for you to tell people where they can find you.
Well, again, it's DonaldJeffries.media is my website. DonaldJeffries.substack.com. I protest just like my show, which will be later today, 5 p.m. Eastern. Is the place to go because I'm shadow banned on Facebook. I'm shadow banned on Twitter. My book, Masking the Truth, is being shadow banned everywhere. They're playing games of that you just wouldn't believe. It's still not showing up in the world. You can't even find the copy that we sent to the Library of Congress in the libraries there. Although a few libraries have taken it now, but it's you got to break their algorithms down, and they're trying to stop. And that includes most of the alt media, most of the big. Thank goodness for David Knight, but a lot of the big names know about the book, and they're refusing to talk about it because they're holding on, clinging to that lab leak theory. And, I'm talking about the dancing nurses and the empty hospitals and why the border wasn't closed. That doesn't equate to a deadly virus. Society wouldn't act that way. But so that's where people can find me. And obviously later today, again, on Rockfin on my YouTube channel, you'll be able to listen to I Protest, 5 p.m. Eastern.
Well, I'll be producing, so that'll be
Yes,
fun.
and produced by the great Tony Arterburn. So it's a great show.
Can't wait. Gard, by the way, thank both of you gentlemen for being here. It made second hour just great. I mean, you can't replicate these two minds. I mean, just putting you two guys here, just having the exchange of ideas. Thank you so much. It's been awesome. Gard, tell people where they can find you.
Well, absolutely. And thanks again, Tony and Don, for both your work. And of course, David and the family, just great. The David Knight Show, thedavidknightshow.com and davidknight.gold. And I just want to remind people again, if they want to get the Trends Journal, if they use the code NIGHT, they get 10% off the yearly subscription for David Knight fans and listeners and so on. And Don, just want to let you know, as a little reference to some of my work, Tony, so the bulk of my work is for MRC TV, and I do articles and videos for mrctv.org. And so you can find their Rumble channel now, which is not censored at just look up MRC TV, the Media Research Center. And Don, in one of my most recent videos, I got to mention so many of the great books that have been published about the COVID-19 pandemic, so-called pandemic. And we got to flash the cover of Masking the Truth up there, along with the real Anthony Fauci and a number of other things like Jeffrey Tucker's book, Lockdown or Liberty or Lockdown, and things like that. So we get to flash the cover up there for a few more thousand people. So that was good.
I appreciate that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's a great book. And so my Substack is Gardner Goldsmith, Gardner Goldsmith, and people can check that out. And then I've got fiction at Amazon and Barnes & Noble, novella called Bite, which has short stories in it. More stuff is going to be coming out. And then if people are interested, every Monday through Friday at 6 o'clock, they can check out Liberty Conspiracy. And the show runs usually an hour and a half. It's never shorter than that, unless something is happening power-wise or something with our great power monopoly here. We usually go for 2 hours. And then if they are interested, they can watch after the fact on Rumble, on Rockfin, and occasionally on YouTube and on BitChute when I know that they're not going to be censored. And the last thing I'll mention is that if people want to follow me, it's at Gard Goldsmith over on Twitter or X or whatever.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining us, gentlemen.
The common man. They created Common Core to dumb down our children. They created Common Pass to track and control us. Their Commons Project to make sure the commoners own nothing. And the communist future. They see the common man as simple, unsophisticated, ordinary. But each of us has worth and dignity created in the image of God. That is what we have in common. That is what they want to take away. Their most powerful weapons are isolation, deception, intimidation. They desire to know everything about us while they hide everything from us. It's time to turn that around and expose what they want to hide. Please share the information and links you'll find at thedavidknightshow.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. If you can't support us financially, please keep us in your prayers. thedavidknightshow.com.